To begin this program now, with much honor, we are pleased to have Ajahn Thirathorn Seniyeng, Deputy Director for E-Learning Development and Implementation from Thai-German Dual Education and E-Learning Development Institute, KMUTNB, be our forum MC. And bonjour, it gives us great pleasure to have three keynote speakers today from University Institute of Technology, France, Université de Leuven, and Université Toulouse. Please enjoy.
ลำดับต่อไปจะเป็นการบรรยายวิชาการนะครับเชิญท่านอาจารย์ธีรธรชนิเยงครับ
ครับผมก็สวัสดีท่านแขกผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านนะครับก่อนอื่นนะฮะเดี๋ยวขอพูดแนะนำเป็นภาษาไทยก่อนนะครับผมอาจารย์ธีรธรชนิเยงนะครับเป็นรองผู้อำนวยการสถาบันศาสตร์การศึกษาและพัฒนาสื่ออิเล็กทรอนิกส์ไทยเยอรมันที่พระจอมเกล้ามหาวิทยาลัยเทคโนโลยีพระจอมเกล้านครเหนือครั้งนี้นะฮะก็ผมจะมา moderate ในส่วนของ Keynote speech นะครับ so let me switch back to English okay so ladies and gentlemen so the keynote speech session is about to begin so dear honorable Mr. President distinguished guests ladies and gentlemen good morning first of all I would like to welcome you to all to this session. Before the speech begins, please allow me to introduce all the three speakers we have today. So the first speaker, Mr. Stefan Lowick, he is the Vice President for International Affairs at ADIUT, the network of 113 University Institute of Technology, or as known as IUT in France. He is going to give the presentation on the system of the DUT in France. The DUT is a French national diploma earned in 2 years of the post-secondary school, as well as to cover the LP, which is the vocational bachelor's, right? Okay, degrees in France, and also the professional education, and it is known as Achiwasiksa in Thai. Or technical education. So please give him a hand, please. And the second speaker, yes, please, if you want to. Okay. The second speaker, Professor Nuruddin Thakorabe. I have just learned from him that most of the Thai students know him as Ajahn Thako. It's a very, very lovely name. Okay, he is a professor from the University of Leuven, France. His topic will cover the IUT in a university cluster, including engineering schools in professional curricula. So please, everyone, give him a hand. And the third, the last but not least, Professor Abdelmalek Benzekri. He is a professor from the University of Toulouse, the third, or as known as the Paul Sabatier University in France. He is going to talk about the IUT and the researches being conducted at the IUT. Please welcome Professor Abdelmalek Benzekri. So, yeah, are you ready, Mr. Stefan? So, yeah, okay. Okay, so the first speaker will cover, let me tell you the timeline of during the keynote speech. Each speaker will give the presentation for half an hour, and then we will get together on the stage again, the four of us, including me. So we will run the question and answer session. Then so please feel free to ask any question, and if you have any question, just ask during the question and answer. Okay? Okay, please enjoy. Are you ready? Hold on. So, okay, are you ready?
Yes,
The
thank
floor
you.
is
Thank
yours.
Dear moderator, dear president, thank you very much. Yes, I will connect the microphone. Not to be too noisy. Yep, okay, it doesn't work. Okay, thank you for giving us, as a network of institutes of technology, the opportunity to open this conference. I note that, of course, you have projected the main theme of the conference into the idea of the sustainable development. You will be no doubt aware of the triple helix theory or system or organization of applied science generally in the world. And some people, some researchers have argued that this triple helix is in fact not so much a triple helix, but a quintuple helix. The fourth helix being citizens, the people in territories, and the fifth is the global obligation to be involved in sustainable development. So I think it's very apposite that today we'll be reviewing that triple helix system with the specific orientation and view of sustainable development in the conference anyway. For the moment, let me introduce you to institutes of technology in France, and you will see that they have many common points with the King Mongkut universities and others like the Fachhochschulen, of course, whom you very well know. I will start, if you don't mind, by giving you a few words of context. And the system, the network of institutes of technology in France was created 52 years ago, as in fact France was experiencing what we call the French miracle. That is to say, after World War II, and a rather lengthy period of reconstruction, France was experiencing very strong economic growth, on average of 5 percentage points every year. And this was achieved through different means. Rationalization, of course, of agriculture. France had so far been an agricultural country. Reorganization of the productive sector, and of course funding, such as funding from the Marshall Plan, but of course also a new ability to engage in trade through, of course, the European Economic Community, and more generally, perhaps more globally, the General Agreement on Tariff and Trades. Similarly, the population was at a sharp increase, and of course that fueled the needs for industry. And of course, that were the main elements, very roughly given, for this French economic miracle. All wasn't rosy, though, and the main problem was a problem linked to the industrial productive structure, and also the fact that growth was mainly consumption-driven, consumption-based. To be more specific, we had a number of large state-owned companies that had been nationalized in the wake of World War II, and not enough SMEs, very few SMEs in fact. And that led to a productive landscape in which, of course, high-level engineering took its place, high-level design took their place, but insufficient mechanization, and mostly with the lack of SMEs, not enough innovation, inventivity, and adaptability. So what happened was a landscape in which you had world-level engineering and design fueled by world-level engineering schools created at the beginning of the 19th century by visionary politicians like Napoleon, for example, and also a large unskilled workforce. A number of those people, those unskilled workers, came from our former colonies, for example, and they had been repatriated, that was the term, with very few usable skills in industry anyway. There was therefore a need for more innovation, more flexibility, to compensate for the lack of SMEs, perhaps more entrepreneurial spirits, and that was not the word we used back in the 1950s and 60s, but that was what it is. And of course, the productive structure was dual in that it opposed large state-owned firms and very small family-owned businesses. Institutes of technology were therefore created, and they were largely a new concept in higher education, certainly a new concept for our universities, which had been so far interested in the liberal arts, philosophy, very little applied science. The aim of this new network in the process of being created was training intermediary professions in industry. Well, I'll call them technicians. Technicians, a word that so far had not been associated with university education, and certainly not with high-level education. What was the role in the productive system of those technicians? Well, they were at a crossroads. Anyway, that was the analysis at the time. Technicians, intermediary professions, were at the crossroads between management and the shop floor. They were seen, or they were expected to be, facilitators for industry and for production. They were also at the crossroads between design, the ideas, and of course the back office, the enablers, the support systems in a company. So you see, those technicians were really at the crossroads of the industrial company structure, and by creating this new class of workers within the company, lawmakers expected to fuel or to push start, as it were, kickstart more innovation, more adaptability in the in society. It was a question, in fact, of balance. The idea was to balance knowledge, know-how, and attitude. And of course, you will recognize here the premises of the definition of what is a competence-based education. What were the competencies expected? First, a solid scientific base, which of course is why we created those institutes of technology in universities. A knowledge and an understanding of how companies work, what I call the systemic approach. Of course, the ability to talk to a wide variety of people and workers in the society, in the company as well. The ability to make decisions, some leadership. Also the idea that they had to be able to undertake projects and therefore manage projects, so project management, and of course a good knowledge of workplace practices, attitudes. All in all, that was informed by the all-important communication skills, in French certainly, and possibly in a second language. Basically, this was deemed possible within the university only with a strong support from the world of work concerning placements, project-based learning, work-based learning as well. All that amounted to quite literally new pedagogy within the university system. So what was created then was a system of several tens of institutes of technology, at least one in each university, given a national reference, nationally defined programs, and the idea was to foster a sectorial approach. The idea was not to prepare students to be good at one job, but to be good in one sector, and within that sector to be adaptable enough to perform several jobs. The idea then was to limit the curricula they designed at the time to 24, 25 specialties. The curriculum was nationally defined with what was deemed enough, 20% regional adaptation. Because of the French industrial regulation, the labor laws, the situation, the new system was positioned at level 5 in the European qualification framework. I think you will be perhaps familiar with the ISCED level, which is the same, in fact, the new ISCED level 5. And therefore, a 2-year study program was implemented. I would like now to refer you to the European reference. As you probably know, of course, the European education system, the European higher education area, also called the Bologna process, is, of course, an unescapable reality in academia today in Europe. Therefore, those institutes were given a Bologna process stamp of approval when the Bologna process developed with 120 ECTS and of course ISCED 5 level, as I said. The Bologna process brought us the idea that we were part of the bachelor level, and of course I will tell you later how we are moving away from level 5 to level 6, but that will be for later. We concentrated on a student-centered approach, which was very new at the time, and of course also a competence-based approach, which I will tell you more. The idea that work-based learning, well, you can know it as well as dual education, was part and parcel of the endeavor. The role of the network then was not only to support each institution, but to foster innovation, to promote applied research and the links between those new institutions and research, which before that had been only fundamental blue sky research in French universities, and of course to promote international experience. I also would like to refer you to the reference, the European reference, which you will understand because of course this tends to have global, to be globally known. There are 3 strands of higher education in Europe. And of course, the academic you all know, I've given you examples here, an MA in philosophy, the professional, and of course we are part of that drive. Now it's called applied science, and of course here at King Mongkut, North Bangkok, you would of course be aware of that. The idea was, at the time it was quite new, but now you will understand it's commonplace, to have teaching and learning, to have research, to have governance and policy with an objective. And that objective is what? Well, innovation, transfer of technology, regional integration, and of course integration with the world of work. The aim being what? In fact, to train citizens, not only to train people for employability, but to train citizens. And of course, employability has this specific definition in the professional higher education sector. it is long-term employability, and of course adaptability comes with it. Breadth of view, I told you, hence the positioning of the network in the universities. The point was argued, though, that this type of professional higher education would be expensive, and the education at that time, the education system, as I said, was mainly theoretical. It was decided to give this network and each Institute of Technology a ways and means to, as it were, collect revenue. And therefore, those institutions had to be protected from the rest of the university to make sure that the revenue they gathered, well, to speak roughly, the money they made, could be kept to them and not taken by their president and other faculties in the universities. So therefore, IUTs and a director of an Institute of Technology in France still today has increased powers concerning money management, what we call budgetary management in a nicer way. Of course, the outreach was, and I said, and I mentioned regional integration, what is very important. The second point I want to stress concerning the European reference is that mostly in Europe you have a binary system with applied sciences making their own network, constituting their own networks. In Denmark, in Germany, of course, in Austria, you mentioned all those nations, we have a binary system whereby applied science are different from university, which can cause some problems. For example, research. Must research be limited to applied sciences? Well, at that time, anyway, we thought it shouldn't. And of course, Abdelmalek will tell you about research, and we'll see that, of course, we do applied research, but we are also involved in fundamental research. That was important at that time. So we created this unitary system whereby the applied sciences are within the university system, but with checks and balances. I told you about the budget, separate internal budget. And of course, a director of an institution, an IT, has authority over their staff, and that's very important. The president or the rector of the university cannot take, remove, or choose the staff for an institution and an IUT, and of course that's important. The compensation for that is that IUTs, Institutes of Technology, are restricted to teaching at B level. Certainly not in research, we're not restricted to low-level research, as it were, but in the teaching and learning, we certainly are. Fact and figures. Today, the network has developed constantly over the last 52 years. There are 113 institutes of technology. I'll show you the map very soon. In all universities. In France, there are 78 universities in France. So roughly, because of mergers, we are sometimes unsure of whether it's 78 or more. But so they cater for the needs of industry as they started, but of course also the service sector is involved. 150,000 students, a bit more than that, 25 wide spectrum specialties, that has not changed. So we are still having this definition whereby we train students for sectors, for sets of jobs, for basically adaptability within a sector. We thought, as time was passing, that it was necessary to reach level ICTechEd6, and so therefore to comply with the fact that the first grade in Europe is the bachelor level, we created bachelor levels, which you can see here on the slide, we have 1,200 programs. So that means that out of the 25 initial setup, we now have 25 plus specialization in 1,200 programs. So a general training for the first 2 years at university, then you reach the bachelor level, which is in 3 years, usually in Europe, and then you specialize, you reach that B level through specialization. And then, of course, we have been able to ask companies, sectors, what they needed in terms of regional, sometimes local education, and to respond for that. So the system is, in fact, a dual system whereby everybody gets very good foundation training, but also very good technological, professional, applied training for the first 2 years, and then students are allowed to specialize if they wish. And of course, Noureddine will tell you how, at that point, they can leave the system and get into engineering schools, management schools, but we will be speaking about engineering schools, of course. The funding comes from the state, mainly as in France everybody tends to think that the state must fund the public service. But of course the funding comes from companies as well, and usually local and regional companies. A few facts still about research, and Abdelmalek will tell you more about that, but most lecturers are researchers as well. 163 research centers are attached to IUTs, and that facilitates research. And of course, our research staff and researcher teachers, lecturers, also participate in research carried out and effected by what we call the national research institutions, but probably you've heard of CNRS, but others, and you have some logos there. Industrial partnerships are numerous and just as easy to make as in the academic sector, just because research is carried out in the academic sectors as well. Let's just mention that our alumni are about 20% of doctoral candidates within the French system. The first 2 years will prepare students for an award, which is a specific short cycle award, and that is what I was telling you about. This specific award aims at employability, innovation, and of course has a network-based quality assurance. I've listed here very briefly the 24 programs that we offer, so that those are from or for the industrial sector, those are for the tertiary sector. You see, for example, that health is not included in this organization, contrary to what happens in Europe. I was telling you about the vocational degrees, professional bachelor degrees, which supplement the 2 years, and of course I told you that they prepare for specific jobs. What is important is that up to 50% of classes are given by professionals, not by academic. Regulation is by academics, but training and the learning is half and half, as it were. I was telling you about regional integration. This is a map. There's a big blank square. That's the Parisian area, which is taken up on the top part of the slide. There are institutes of technology in overseas territories as well, and so the definition here is that innovation has a regional vector, and I think here nobody would disagree with that. The teaching and learning strategy is important. 3 points. First is the link with research, and of course it is why we linked institutes of technology to the academic world and universities. The definition we have of research, it can be blue sky research, fundamental research, but also applied research. Hence, the notion of research, innovation, and transfer of technology are all specific definition of one endeavor, which is research. In the last lines, you can see that we think that students are important agent of research, and I think you would also here in King Mongkut, North Bangkok, agree with that. Students are trained in research from day one, and they are vectors of research in the light of regional integration as well. Of course, the training is both, as I said, academic and professional. A high number of hours, as you can see, up to 1,800 hours of tuition in 2 years, and a mix of traditional lectures and applied endeavors, seminars, lab work, which develop inductive pedagogy and student-centered learning. And of course, the programs are either dual education with complete integration with the company, or for those who are not totally integrated with the companies, the use of placements, usually at the end of the year, of each year. Of course, what we have been led to question over the years is, although universities are autonomous, although institutes of technology benefit from a protection, it is clearly expected of the system to contribute to social welfare, social well-being. The word, I suppose, is university social responsibility. We are, I think, better than academic universities, vectors and supporters of that endeavor of social responsibility. First of all, a very diverse public. I sometimes say we have very good students, but we also have good students, and we also have average students, and we also have below average students. And of course, we select those below average students. And then our policy is to have them succeed at the same rate as excellent students. So this is our challenge, and I think this is a challenge we've been able to meet in the last 52 years. We concentrate ourselves on long-term employability, and of course meeting the needs of the regional economy, which allows, of course, a thorough integration with the world of work. Let's be clear about what is expected of the world of work. 4 tasks or 4 aims. First, they have to design courses with us. And although we have nationally designed courses, we make sure the world of work is thoroughly involved in the design of those courses. They are involved, they must deliver the courses. That is to say, to give classes, at least 20% by regulation of our classes are given by people straight out of the company. For example, in my own institution, thank you. In my own institution, we are open on Saturdays, and that enables company personnel, company staff, business people, world of work people to come and teach our students. Funding and we are allowed to receive company tax funds, and most of the equipment we buy is, well, the money comes from companies. Administration and the Institute of Technology are the only academic institutions for which the chairman of the board is a member of a company, a member of the Board of Work. I won't spend too much time on quality assurance, but of course the network has spawned its own quality assurance with the support of the state, and of course it is recognized by European quality assurance bodies. Why do we have our own quality assurance system? It's very simple. Quality assurance systems usually do not make enough room for people from the world of work. Therefore, we created our own, and we have basically half academics and half representative of the world of work. The network is nationally steered. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but that ensures internal improvement, internal best practices, and of course capacity building. It also provides us with specifically made resources like business simulation, serious games, national competitions, and the like. How do we keep in touch with reality? We have been able to improve our curricula in the specialties on a constant basis with the 4 points you have here. Entrepreneurship, every student receives a module on that. Economic intelligence, of course sustainable development, and each specialty has been able to devise their own position and provisions for sustainable development, and of course project management, but that's more standard. The problem in France is still one of high youth unemployment, up to nearly 25% of people below the age of 24 are unemployed, and faced with that reality, one of the solutions, or one of the tracks, one of the ideas to improve is to improve access to higher education, and to integrate higher education even better with the labor market expectations. It's also true that citizens have an increased appetite for higher education, and of course we've been able to identify the new competencies, or at least the new skills that are expected of technicians nowadays. How do they learn to learn? That's a key question for adaptability. How do they adapt then? How can they communicate better? How can they lead? How can they be leaders even at technician and intermediary levels? How can they have international experience and of course increase their problem-solving skills? So that's what we are working on. And also the demands of the state is take a more diverse body of students. That is to say, not only the best students. The demand clearly is to limit, or perhaps even to end selection. That is the state demand, which we have to adapt, I suppose. The network is therefore living through a period of accelerated mutation. The questions are, how do we accept those new students, and how we make sure they succeed in getting jobs, getting employability, having access to further education. The idea is to increase project-based learning, to increase regional integration, to increase work-based learning, to increase dual education, and also to redefine the pace of learning. So of course, we use, in France anyway, we used to have a very top-down approach to learning, and that has changed quite dramatically with the competence-based approach, which we see as a response to labor market trends. Each job has now been defined as a set of competencies, and at network level, we've been able to reflect on what is a technician, what are the basic competencies of a mid-ranking executive, and of course we have been better able to define what competencies are linked to what qualifications. I will go through the, I will do not spend too much time on RPL, but of course defining each job in terms of competencies allows RPL to be affected, and that's understood. We created a task force to empower the network to have a new national definition of what we do. We have defined what are the basic skills expected of a technician with a set of core learning outcomes, and of course specific skills, which are all the outcomes expected of any technician education. Of course, what is important to know is we are also academics, and therefore the notion of academic knowledge has survived this. And it's maybe strange to you that we define our institutions and our learning in terms of competencies, but at the same time we still attach great importance to academic knowledge and scientific knowledge. So that's perhaps one of the strange things here. The task force we created was or is tasked with improving and our response with capacity building. The work at hand, is really how we deconstruct our existing setup, our existing curricula, how we deconstruct our syllabuses as well, and how we end with such things as course units, how we end the life of course modules, how we make sure that we stop that fragmentation which leads to fragmented knowledge and of course through fragmented teaching, and how we replace the traditional delivery methods, lectures and applied lab works, by something new which has to be defined. For example, work-based learning, I've mentioned that several times, seminars, inverted classes, video capsules, week-long lessons. For example, in my institution, in electrical engineering, and I know there are several electrical engineering specialists here, we have stopped having a class of analog electronics, then a class of control, and then a seminar on applied physics, and then a lecture on Fourier transform. We have stopped that, and we have week-long seminars. The week-long seminar has one general subject, for example, analog electronics, and we start by giving the student a project. They do it by groups of usually 4, 5, 6. They have all the elements in the library or over the internet on the online platform, and teachers do not come and teach. They are in their offices and they're there to wait for questions. In our classes, there are no desks like this one. We have removed them. The teacher is not to be seen, he is to be found. That is to say, the student has to be active, he or she has to ask questions. At the end of the week, each student has to present the result of his work, and just before that, he's able to ask fundamental questions. What is it I have not understood? what do I need in terms of theoretical learning? And then the teacher, if asked, will give a lecture. So lectures are given at the end of the week. And at the end of the week, everybody present their subjects, and learning comes from those confrontations, in fact. And the following week, we have another seminar on that subject. The last point is, we used to have a fairly separate structure. You see the dark blue there. The structure was in 2 years. We are having it evolved this way. That is to say, we will have a 3-year structure, which we think gives us more time for more flexibility, for more teaching, but for more experience. And of course, we enable then students to choose for further studies, and of course that will be given in a few seconds, or to have the choice for employment. So the issue here is how we totally change a system, and this is in progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the big picture of the new concept of the higher education in France, especially for the vocational education, professional education, and the academic. So let me switch back to Thai to give you the summary of the presentations. ก็หลังจากที่อาจารย์ท่านสเตฟานนะครับได้พูดถึงภาพรวมของการศึกษาในประเทศฝรั่งเศสที่พูดถึงตั้งแต่ยุคหลังสงครามนะครับที่ท่านพูดถึง French Miracle หลังสงครามนะครับฝรั่งเศสก็ขาดแคลน SME นะครับทำให้คอนเซปต์ใหม่ของอุดมศึกษาเนี่ย Higher Education นะครับก็คือจะเริ่มไปฝึกแรงงานในภาคอุตสาหกรรมมากขึ้นซึ่งภาคอุตสาหกรรมเนี่ยก็จะไปเน้นอาชีวศึกษาแต่สิ่งที่น่าสนใจนะครับที่ทางคุณสเตฟานพูดเนี่ยก็คือเน้นป้อนงานที่ตรงกับความต้องการของภาคอุตสาหกรรมจริงแทนที่จะเน้นว่าป้อนช่างไฟ100 คนอะไรเงี้ยนะฮะแต่เน้นตรงความต้องการว่าภาคอุตสาหกรรมต้องการเท่าไหร่ก็ป้อนตามความต้องการเท่านั้นไม่ใช่เน้นเป็นจ็อบนะครับอันนั้นนี่น่าสนใจนะฮะรวมไปถึงการแยกกันอย่างชัดเจนระหว่างacademic นะในภาคของการศึกษาภาคปกตินะครับรวมไปถึง professional และก็ vocational education นะฮะตรงนี้น่าสนใจมากนะฮะเพราะว่าทุกอย่างแยกกันชัดเจนโดยที่ professional education จะเป็นเรื่องของปริญญานะครับที่ถ้าดูทางสไลด์เมื่อสักครู่เนี่ยจะมีบอกว่าตัวอย่างจะเป็นปริญญาตรีในสาขาต่างๆนะครับแล้วก็แยกออกมาเป็น vocational education ที่จะเป็นตัวที่วุฒิการศึกษาจะเป็นดิโพลมานะครับทั้งหมดเนี่ยจะมี113 IUT นะกระจายไปทั่วประเทศนะใน78 มหาวิทยาลัยนะครับซึ่งก็ได้ทั้งงบจากที่เป็นจากภาครัฐแล้วก็งบที่มาจากภาคเอกชนนะครับโดยจะมีถึง163 Research Center นะครับในของที่เป็นของ IUT นะครับ 20% ของที่น่าสนใจอย่างหนึ่งคือ 20% ของนักศึกษาปริญญาเอกเนี่ยนะในประเทศฝรั่งเศสเนี่ยจะมาจากสาย IUT นะสายช่างเนี่ยสายอาชีวะนะครับน่าสนใจมากนะครับแล้วก็มีระบบการป้องกันคุณภาพการศึกษาที่เป็นของตัวเองนะนอกจากที่จะอ้างอิงระบบการประกันคุณภาพการศึกษาของจากภายนอกแล้วก็ยังมีของตัวเองด้วยนะครับรวมไปถึงในตอนท้ายจะเห็นว่าคุณสเตฟานพูดถึงนะครับการพัฒนาบุคลากรในสายอาชีวศึกษาเนี่ยให้เสริมทักษะที่เป็นทักษะในศตวรรษที่ 21 มากขึ้นนะ 21st century skill ทั้งหลายไม่ว่าจะเป็นวิธีการเรียน learn to learn นะครับรวมไปถึงการแก้ปัญหานะฮะ problem solving skill ทักษะในการแก้ปัญหาต่างๆนะฮะซึ่งอย่างที่เรารู้กันนะครับว่าอาชีวศึกษาในยุคปัจจุบันนี้นะฮะของทางฝรั่งเศสเองเนี่ยก็เน้น competence based approach ก็คือเป็นหลักสูตรฐานสมรรถนะจริงๆนะครับไม่ใช่ว่าจบไปแล้วนี่เนี่ยนะครับยังไม่รู้ว่าตัวเองซ่อมเรียนไฟฟ้าเรียนช่างไฟฟ้าแต่ยังไม่รู้ว่าตัวเองจะซ่อมไฟซ่อมทักษะพื้นฐานทางด้านไฟฟ้าได้หรือเปล่าเป็นต้นนะ Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you ก็เสียงปรบมือให้กับ